too. I will also share these slides with Danielle so that she can upload it to your shared folder. But our focus for today is to get you into the tools and costing any changes to the line items that were made from 2019 to 2020. So again, like Danielle said, in an update year, the amount of work to do should be considerably less. So this is just to kind of refresh your memories on how to do it. We did have a couple of tool upgrades since you have last been in the tools. I think that it will be beneficial for you all, but also just want to make sure you know how all of it works. Very, very briefly, for those of you who have not been a part of PBB, I wanted to spend just 2 to 3 minutes kind of reminding everybody of the process. And when we talk about implementing a priority-based budget, we kind of break it down into 3 questions. What do we do? What does it cost? And why are we in business? Those are the 3 kind of main points of focus as you implement your model. So the first question, what do we do? This is answered by program identification. So you all went through that process last year. Danielle has done a lot of work to consolidate and combine programs for this year. What does it cost? That's what we're going to focus on today, which is just getting your line items allocated to the programs to help identify a true cost of each specific program. And then the final question, why are we in business? This is connecting your programs to the results that have been identified by the City of Lawrence. So that's going to be, those are the 3 steps that we're going to cover just at a very high level first, and then we'll do a deeper dive into allocations. So from the program perspective, the first step that we do with any organization that is launching an implementation is to think about the programs and services that are offered by the organization, typically broken out by department. These are bigger than tasks, smaller than departments, and they're really action-oriented and should drive the story of what each department does. They can be marked as community or external facing, or they can be needed internally to run the organization, and we call those governance programs. So all governance programs are scored against a set of governance results, and all community programs are scored against a set of community results. For the cost allocation piece, we allocate personnel by percentage of time spent, and we allocate operating costs by dollar amount associated with each program. This information will be helpful as you all take the data and use it for decision making and communicating. Some of the questions that can be answered immediately after cost allocation is just identifying where you spend your time, where staff is spending their time, just acknowledging a total program cost and identifying if that feels like it's in line with what you were expecting, and then also comparing costs with any fees or grant funding. Currently, you all do not track revenue in the system, but you all will know if you charge a fee for a service or if you have a grant that covers some of the cost, and that can be identified in the scoring versus cost recovery, which brings me to scoring. So you all have a set of unique results that are specific to the City of Lawrence. Then we also have a set of basic program attributes that ResourceX provides. This is to help further describe your programs and are typically data points that aren't captured in a strategic plan or a business plan that was used to create the set of results. So the 5 basic program attributes are mandate, reliance, demand, population served, and cost recovery. All programs are evaluated against their appropriate set of results. So again, community or governance, and then every program is evaluated against the set of BPAs, or basic program attributes. Okay, that is the briefest introduction to priority-based budgeting. Are there any questions at this point, or I can just continue on into the costing?
Questions? Nope. Okay, I think we're good to move on.
Perfect. So we're going to cover the methodology of cost allocation. We'll look at allocating personnel. We always recommend that you do that first, and it'll be apparent as we get into the slides why we do that. Then I have just a little kind of cheat sheet for the basic steps. Then we'll look at non-personnel and then the non-personnel overview. So when we talk about allocating line items to programs, we have taken your adopted budget and uploaded that into the tools, and then it's broken out by cost type, so personnel or non-personnel. We're going to allocate all of the line items that are in the tools to the programs that have been identified for this budget year. We start with positions. We do that because it creates some helpful, not shortcuts, but some helpful tools when we get to the non-personnel side of things. Personnel is allocated by percentage of time spent on each program. And our best practice is to say, start with multiples of 5. This is simply to assist with math, and also it kind of will point out areas that may need further consideration when we think about program size and program description. So if you are allocating a value smaller than 5%, then we want to think about, are you allocating at the task level? Conversely, though, if you are allocating less than 5% of your time to a program, that may be the story that you want to tell. It may be that you are only able to spend 1% of your time on a program, and in a comment about your program, you may say, I wish I could spend 10% of my time on this, but I am only realistically able to devote 1% of my time at this point. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're allocating 90% of your time to one program, you might want to talk with Danielle about considering breaking that program into 2 smaller programs, simply so that we can get a more accurate representation of where you're spending your time. Once you have finished personnel allocations, we'll move over to the operating side, and this is going to be allocated by dollar amount. So you will be assigning a specific amount to each program. We ask there, again, I mentioned that there are some ways to spread costs based on FTE or percentage, and we really do hope that you will take the time to go through and allocate directly where you can, and then look at those other options as you move through to get your allocations completed. Okay, I know it's been a while since you were in the tools, but just as a reminder, this is what it will look like. You are going to be clicking on that middle program costing icon to get to the tools that you need to use. This is what it will look like within your tools minus the revenue. So you will have the 2 cost types, personnel and non-personnel. You will, again, will want to allocate personnel first, and personnel, again, is percentage of time. So personnel, percentage of time. Just helpful memory tool there. And what you'll want to do first is just simply click on the red bar to dive in to the more detailed information. Once you've clicked on the personnel button, all of the positions associated will come down into each specific position. So it's going to, anytime you click on a red bar, it's going to go into a more specific level of information. So clicking on that red bar, if you have multiple positions or multiple costs associated with a position title, you can get into the specific position by clicking again. So once you have identified the position that you want to allocate, you can hover over the red bar, which will bring up this gear icon. For any of you who went through this last year, you probably remember the fun of holding down Shift and clicking. We don't have to do that anymore. Now, when you hover over a bar, if there is action that can be taken at that level, then a gear icon will pop up. Also, by hovering over the red bar, you will see just basic summary information about the allocations to that position. So hovering will get you basic allocation information, and it will also pull up that gear icon. Clicking on the gear at any level will bring up the allocation box that is associated with the amount of information available at that level. So if you click at the position title, If there are multiple positions associated with that title, you're going to get all those positions. If you go down to one specific position and click that gear, you're just going to get that individual position. So 2 paths to allocation: allocating at the position level and allocating at the individual level. From here, it's going to look the same, just the amount of information that you have in the top of the table will be, so if we are allocating at the position level, you may have multiple positions that you can allocate all at once versus allocating to one specific person. Once you have identified whichever path works for you best, the steps to take are the same. So you will see the data that is available for you to allocate in the top table. You can choose to select all, well, it will come as defaulted, selected all those positions. You can deselect somebody if you want to allocate one individual differently. You'll just uncheck the box under that selected column. All of the programs that are associated with your user group or that you allocated to previously will appear in the bottom table. Using the allocation column, you will simply enter the value that you want to allocate. So again, for positions, it's going to be percentage of time spent. So you simply click on a line, type in 20, and then click update, and it will allocate 20% of that individual or that group of individuals' time. And then if you have anything remaining after you've allocated directly, you can spread any remaining time evenly across selected programs. So again, over here under include, you can uncheck any boxes that you don't want to include when spreading a cost, but keep the box that you've allocated directly to checked, because it's going to take that amount into consideration when it's doing the calculation. So allocate directly first, and then you can spread any remaining time across the programs that you've selected. Just to highlight a couple of new features within the cost allocation tools, this is available from this home screen, so you can access this whether you're allocating personnel or non-personnel. But if you click this restack button, this is just going to allow you to change the way that you view the data. So currently the default is going to go cost type, position, then or position title, and then specific position. If you want to regroup and view it by fund or division or any of those pieces of data that are captured in your budget line items, you can simply click on the arrow to see the drop down, and then using the hand icon, you can drag any one of these to the top, so it'll change just the way that you view the data or how it's filtered for you to view. Anytime that you make changes to these stack levels, if you click OK, it will change it just for this session that you are working on at the moment. If you click Save, it's going to save that as your default, so every time you log in, you'll see it in that restacked format. You can always change that saved default, but just so you know, if you log in and it looks different than what you were expecting, you likely clicked Save. So OK is for individual session, Save is to change the default. As you're going through and trying to identify those things that need to be allocated, you can click this sort button and you can sort based on percentage of allocation completed. You can sort based on alphabetical. It's just a quick shortcut to move things to the top or bottom. This toggle to program costs, this will take you away from that cost type view, and you can see the total program cost. This is a great place to go when you're kind of doing that gut check of whether or not the program's cost is matching up to your expectations. You can click on each of these blue bars to see the breakdown by cost type. So if you feel like one of the total costs looks off, click on the blue bar, and you can then dive into the non-personnel allocations and the personnel allocations. And then finally, excuse me for a second, excuse me, you can click on this download summary. This is going to download all of your user group or department information into an Excel spreadsheet. There are going to be 6 tabs across the bottom. The first tab will look like this. So it is just going to show you your programs and the total cost allocated to them, then broken out by FTE, personnel, and non-personnel. The other tab that I find has been most useful is this allocations program cost. It's going to take each specific program and show you broken out by cost type and specific line item what is allocated to each program. So download summary, first tab will show you a program summary. This tab is going to show you the detail of what is allocated to each program. Okay, just kind of basic personnel overview. Click on the bars to expand out for more data. Hover over the red bar to pull up the gear icon. Then you're going to select the line items that you want to allocate. They will default to selected. Then allocate directly by percentage of time spent. Use the evenly button to spread anything that's remaining. And then make sure you click update. You should see the red bars here turn to green once you hit 100% allocation. It will stay red if you have under allocated, and it will stay red if you have over allocated. So that's just kind of your checkpoint. If at any point you do want to start over, there's a reset button right next to the evenly button. So just click reset and update, and it will take you back to 0. Okay, that is personnel allocations. Are there any questions about personnel specifically?
Question? Nope, I don't think so.
Perfect. We will keep on cruising. Okay, once your personnel allocations are complete, your red bar will turn green, and then you'll know that you can move on to non-personnel. So you'll click on non-personnel, remembering that non-personnel is allocated by dollar amount spent on each program. Again, you simply click on the red bar to expand out for more specific information. If there is a third level of data for your line items, you can click to get to that specific data. I believe in your budget information, we have that third level on the personnel side, not on the non-personnel side, but we're going to jump into the tools in just a second and actually walk through this. Okay, so again, you can hover over any of those red bars to get a summary and to bring up that gear icon. Clicking on the gear is what's going to open up the allocation box. So if you have multiple line items under one object name or account name, then you're going to pull up multiple line items. If you want to go down to individual level, then you'll have to click again. So allocating at the object level, we're going to click on that gear icon to pull up the same kind of allocation action table here. And you'll see we have a few extra options here, and we're going to get into that right here. So all of the line items that have been selected to allocate will again appear in the top. You can deselect any that you want to allocate separately from the others. All of the associated programs that either are assigned to your user group or that you allocated to in a previous budget will show up here. We want to allocate directly first. So again, typing in a value here. So typing in $1,200 by a specific program, and then you can click update, or you can continue to work through all of your dollar amounts and then click update. You can also allocate by percent here. So if you know that you spend 25% of your advertising expenses on community beautification, you simply type in 25 into the allocated cost column and then click that percent button. Clicking the percent button will let our system do that calculation for you. Once you have done those direct allocations, you can spread any remaining costs by FTE. So our system will track what the FTE allocations were, and it will populate this column here. And then you can spread any of your remaining dollars by the number of FTE associated with a specific program. Or we also have that evenly button. So you can spread anything remaining evenly across selected programs. Remembering to uncheck any programs that you don't want to spread to. Okay, again, just the high-level summary. Click on bars, hover to get the allocation gear, and then important actions. Select the line items to allocate directly by dollar amount, spread by FTE or evenly, and then save your allocations by clicking update. If you do click out of the box without clicking update, you will lose your work, so please remember to click that update box. Okay, so that is kind of the quick reintroduction of program costing. Now I wanted to jump into your tools and show you just step by step. And if anybody has any questions as we do this, I am going to go into finance as our example user group. So I'm logged in as finance, and I'm going to click on this program costing icon. You will see as it pulls the data, you have your restack, your sort, toggle to program costs, and your download summary. So if we click down into things that still need to be allocated, we have a list of things that need to be allocated here. If I hover over here, I can see that there's one item associated with freight, and the total cost is $5,000. If I click on the gear, it's going to pull up that line item, and, well, that was a bad one to pick. Let's come down here. We'll come down to communications and postage. So we have two items here for a total cost of $200,000. You'll see we have one of those fully allocated from the previous budget. We have another $65,000 that still needs to be allocated. You'll see that we have finance programs listed as associated with this user group, but previously some of it was allocated outside of the department. So that's still going to show up highlighted in yellow because it's been allocated to previously. So I can deselect this one that's already been allocated, and then I would just be able to allocate that one. But now I can apply this other $65,000 if I wanted to update this and do 100% of the postage costs. I would just click here, type 100, and click %, or I could directly allocate by dollar amount to any of those programs. Then I would want to click update. Similarly, on the personnel side of things, I can look to see what needs to be, what's lacking some allocation, and I can click here to pull up that allocation table. It looks like we just have a little bit left to allocate. It could simply be needing to update a percentage, but we can easily click into this allocation to update to get this fully allocated. The allocation summary is where you can go back in and check to make sure that everything makes sense from a program allocation standpoint. And we can also toggle over to view, excuse me. We can toggle over to see the program costs. Are there any questions about accessing this or diving into it?
Do you guys have questions? It looks a little bit different than last year. Last year when you got in there, it was everything was red and needed to be allocated. This time, really what needs to be allocated are the programs that were removed. So everything that's been combined has followed that parent, has been rolled into that parent program. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more streamlined than it was previously. But It is not yet. We're still working through that.
And just for clarification, any programs that were rolled up will have saved any previous allocations to them. So if a program was combined, don't worry, you did not lose your allocations. It will still be there.
I think we'll have a lot of questions by the end because
Yeah.
None of us did this last year's Tristan, so
Right.
we'll catch you as it comes.
Yes, and that sounds good. And I would extend the invite to anyone. If you guys are, I know that we have several new kind of key PBB implementers in a number of our departments. So I'm happy if the first time you want to get in the tool, you just send me a meeting invite for an hour and we can kind of walk through, this is how it looks, this is how it kind of functions. I'm happy to do that because I think it is one of those things, once you get in there and you get in it, it really starts to make sense, but you kind of got to get in there and start doing it. But it is a lot easier than it was last year, so that's the good news.
We're allocating 2020 budget.
Yep. And the other thing I wanted to cover, and Liz, would you be able to go back to our data under the program inventory and pull up the citywide programs?
Absolutely.
So as super users and with Liz, we have had a lot of conversation. I think Liz mentioned kind of trying to figure out how to share your story and what do we want to get across. And so one of the things that we have done, and we did this last year, but it was kind of on the back end, and this time we're doing it on the front end, is we have created a citywide user group that everyone will be able to cost out things to when you get to the costing component. And these programs.
And Danielle, I'm going to show them how to find them.
Oh, perfect. Yes, we'll start there and then I'll get into the methodology.
So if you are looking for a program in this table below, and you know that a program exists, for instance, these citywide programs, if you are looking outside of your user group, which is typically synonymous with your department, simply click this include additional programs, and then we can look for other user groups to pull up their program inventory. So from this user group, we simply select citywide, and it will now pull those citywide programs to the bottom of your table. Once you have allocated to one of these programs, it will always pull into the table where you have allocated to it. So you will not have to do this every time you revisit one of your allocations, but you will have to do it for that initial allocation. But you simply would, once you've allocated to budget development and administration, it will pull up here with a yellow bar showing that you have allocated to it.
So the reason, yes, thank you. So the reason we did this, and I kind of, will you pull up the full list? Because I kind of just want to walk through them. So these are programs that we either found last year or this year. Oh, there we go. That multiple departments had something similar. So the first one on there is boards and commission support. As you know, the city has a number of advisory boards that are staffed by people in departments. So instead of having a transportation commission program, we have one program for all of our boards and commission kind of support. So if you are somebody who, staffs a number of these boards, obviously a portion of your time should go towards this program, and it's housed in the citywide bucket. So the same can be said for, there were two departments that had ADA-related programs, multiple departments that had GIS-related programs, MSO and IT. We have HR administration, so those internal service costs related to HR. would likely go into that HR administration. We also took out, some departments had specific training programs, and we housed all of that in HR administration. So think of that beyond just the HR function. It's the things that departments do as well related to HR-related activities.
So would IT be one of them? For like the police department? We have our own IT department, and then we have to use
Yep.
these IT departments.
Yes, and so when we get to that component of it, we can sit through and kind of talk through that, because you guys are a little bit different in that arena. Risk management is another one. The domestic preparedness, we may change the name of this, but there were a lot of departments that had programs related to kind of preparing for, natural disasters, some of those kind of functions. I think transit had one. I think PD, fire obviously had them. MSO had one. So there are a lot of different city departments that in the event of a natural disaster would obviously be involved, and there's some level of preparation ahead of time for that. So we had one citywide program. We also moved utility billing into citywide to capture all utility billing, not just utility billing, the division within finance, but to include everything related to billing functions. And then budget development and administration. So I would assume all of your time, at least a small portion of it, because I see you in all of these meetings, would be allocated to this citywide program. So what we really tried to do is, one of the things we want to be able to talk about and kind of share our story is that when we talk about budget administration and development, that's not just happening in the finance department. That's not just happening in the manager's office. That's a function that every department is involved with, and isn't a cost that if you were an average citizen, you could find anywhere in our budget book with the way that we currently budget. So this is trying to help get at some of that information, some of these things that we do across the entire city. So that's why we have that program. So it may be a little bit, you'll have to click that additional kind of drop-down menu to get those programs to pull over this first time. But once you start allocating to it in future years, it'll automatically populate because you've allocated to it before. Yeah.
So we can use that as one of our categories last year, for instance, budget development and administration. Have you put some allocations to that, or I just need to go reallocate?
That's part of what you need to do. Yep, just to make sure that when you look at your stuff, it's allocated appropriately. The one thing I will say is we had like a $7 million administration bucket, and we deleted that program. So that $7 million is now going to show up as needing to be allocated, and it's going to be in everybody's department. So a lot of that should have been captured in that, and we'll kind of force you to reallocate it. Yeah.
And that was the complete list of the citywide programs, what was just up there.
Yep.
So like there's two of them on there, HR administration and budget development, that probably every department is going to have allocations to, but the rest of them may only be one or two departments, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Who will determine that percentage rate for the other departments, the allocations for the other departments, for like IT or HR? Who determines that percentage? Is that you guys or that?
You will. It depends on how much time you guys are putting towards those type of activities, because that's not something, I'm not going to be able to go, Steve spends this much of his time doing this and this much of his time doing that, whereas that's something that the departments will need to do. Yep.
Walk through again how, if you log on, how do you make sure that you have those citywide programs in the list of what you need to allocate?
Perfect.
So when you log in, and you pull up you click on that gear to pull up the programs or the line items that you want to allocate, you simply click include additional programs, and then you can pull up citywide. Or I heard somebody say they might want to look at IT programs. So you could also pull up information technology programs, and those will pull up in the table for you to decide if you want to allocate to them. Then once you've allocated to it, it will continue to show up in the table, and all of the extraneous ones will go away.
Does that kind of make sense? And I'll try to take a little snippet of it when I send out my email to you all this afternoon, just as a kind of reminder of this is where it's at, this is what it'll look like.
And
once you change the allocation and update it, those are the only ones. If it's 0, they won't be included, right?
Yeah, you may have to
Or
click out of it.
update or
Yeah.
whatever, and then go back in. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You may have to click out of it and then come back, but yeah.
and
There was
to
another.
to be clear, those that are associated with your user group will still pull up even if there's a 0 allocation. It's those that are outside of your user group, if you're not using, will not show.
Yes.
So from a process standpoint of me going through here, a wise thing might be for me to pull up all of them the first time around, kind of click through them and maybe allocate a few dollars or a percent to them.
You could do that initially.
And then then I can go back and do my whole list, and all these previous ones will go away.
Yes.
If I want to take a look at it first time around, no harm will be done by doing that, because I can change it.
Yep, you can change it.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Will the last year's, I think you said will last year percentages be in there?
I believe so. Liz, would you like to talk through that? If they allocated the non-personnel based on percentage, that'll hold through to the 2020 numbers, right?
It will, with one caveat, since we don't have the personnel data updated yet, if you are planning to spread anything by FTE, I would hold off on doing that until you have completed your personnel allocations. Otherwise, you'll want to go back and do that again. So if any of your personnel allocations are going to change and you're planning to spread anything by FTE, I would just hold off until you have your personnel allocated.
And I will have an idea this afternoon of when we can expect those numbers to be in. We've had a couple obstacles with it. My hope was to have everything ready to go for this meeting, so I apologize for that. But in my big wrap-up email this afternoon, I'll have the idea for you all when that will be in there. Are there other questions?
So are we waiting till we get that from you, or only if we're doing it by FT, or we're just on hold until we hear from you about all of them?
You can't,
If
so
it
if
was
you're not going
percentage,
to
it
do
wouldn't
it by
impact
FTE,
it. Okay.
then you can go in and do the non-personnel stuff. So like, if you guys have a lot of capital in your 2020 budget, I would go in and just start allocating that right away, because you're not going to spread that by FTE. If you're looking at your training line item, I would wait and do that until we have the FTE in there, because it's easy for the training and development line item to just say, spread that, by FTE, unless you know specifically that somebody's going to do more than somebody else. The other thing that I wanted to know, and I think it's easy to see when you get in there, but for those of you that have multiple divisions and multiple funds and those sorts of things, you can break down the data just by like object code, for example. So like if you wanted to do all of your capital, you don't have to do it necessarily by each individual fund. You can pull up, your construction line item, and it'll pull up all of your construction regardless of what fund it's in. Does that kind of make sense to people? So I think sometimes that's a little bit easier if you say, all right, I know where all my, I know where all my CIP projects are, so let's go ahead and allocate those to the appropriate program and get those big dollar amounts kind of done and out of the way.
And Danielle, I just wanted to show using that restack function, if you did want to view your data filtered by division, you could come in here and still keep cost type at the top. But if you have a division, or if you want to look at it by fund, we can pull division up under cost type and then click OK. And then when you click down into it, you now have your divisions and then the line items associated. Similarly, if you wanted to do that by fund, you could simply drag that up to under cost type and it will update by fund. So it's much easier in this upgraded tool to view your data in whatever way is most beneficial for you.
Yes. And the other thing, so if you're looking at this screen, I see the home program fund. That one's one where, Brandon, you could just click on the little icon guy, because that is one program, and then you don't have to do it by line item. You can just say that whole fund is tied to this one program, and then move on to the next one, and it'll take all the line items in there. So I think this restacking tool will be really helpful, and it depends based on department. I can see some people wanting to do it by fund. I can see some people wanting to do it by division. I can see some people not wanting to really use this functionality at all. So it'll really be kind of department specific, but this should help kind of expedite the actual costing process for you guys, whereas we didn't really have this level of functionality last year. Does that make sense? I'm still seeing a few kind of, like there's still a few questions. Do you guys just want to get in the tool and call me? Yep, okay, all right, well that sounds good.
And Danielle,
Liz, yes.
I just wanted to confirm all of the existing users should be functioning properly. I did have Mike reset passwords to Lawrence 2019, all lowercase. So
Okay, for everyone?
For everyone. So all you have to do to change your password is from this main menu, click change password, and that should work. But everything has been reset, so it's your Lawrence email address and then Lawrence 2019.
All right. And I think you all should have access to it, but if you try to log in with that information, your email in Lawrence 2019, and you can't, just let me know and I'll get it updated. Pretty easy process. All right, Liz, do you have any final items on your end?
No, I will share the recording, I will share the slides, and I will add a slide for including additional user groups. But I will send that over to you, Danielle, so that you can put it on the shared file.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that.
Of course.
I will email you guys all when I get that information from Liz, and I'll just kind of have one big summary email with deadlines and all of that sort of thing. But please feel free to let me know if you have questions. Just set up a meeting with me. If you want to kind of go through the first few together, more than happy to do that as well. Yes. Is there definitions in there? So yes. Yes. Yep. And we tried to kind of beef those up a little bit as well, so they should be relatively defined. Yes. Yep. All right. Any final questions? All right. Well, thank you all. I will probably be setting up future versions of this as we get into the next phases of this process, but I think it's a little easier since we haven't been in the tool a while to kind of have these and get everybody refreshed. So let me know what questions you had, and I will be reaching out to, there are a couple small questions I have as I was going in and updating our program inventory that I will be reaching out to you all for, but